Tonight's lecture is going to be kind of a combination of two lectures because neither one of them is long enough to fill up an entire meeting, so I'm going to kind of combine two of them, but they are related in a couple of ways. One is a portion of a talk that I gave at the Cerrito Stake entitled Transitioning from Emergency Preparedness to Self-Reliance. At that meeting, and I'll ask you, how many of you have been on the church's emergency preparedness website? Well, in actuality, nobody has, because the church doesn't have an emergency preparedness website. It's called Provident Living. They don't talk about emergency preparedness, they talk about living providently. And one of the things that as I've gone through and done the Emergency Preparedness 101 lectures on water storage and everything else that I've done, I'm kind of, I wouldn't say running out of topics, but I'm running out of topics for basic emergency preparedness. And it dawned on me the other day that we really should more focus on provident living, on self-reliance, rather than just emergency preparedness. Rather than just be prepared for an emergency, we should be prepared to be self-reliant. And why should we do that? Well, there are lots of reasons. Not the least of which is, if you stop to think of the calamities of the past, name a biblical or any kind of calamity of the past. Name one.
Flood.
Flood. Okay. Floods. What else? Famine. Pestilence. Earthquakes. Volcanoes. Storms. Smiting of the firstborn. That's always my favorite one. I'm the firstborn, so should be my least favorite. Can any of those reoccur? All of those can reoccur. Maybe not the smiting of the firstborn, I hope. But all of those could reoccur, right? And can and do with kind of regularity. Now add to that some of the modern problems that can be catastrophes can be thrown in there. What's a modern catastrophe that may happen of some biblical proportion?
Nuclear issue.
Nuclear war.
Chemical.
Economic crisis. Good topic. It's one of the reasons why I've changed what we're talking about today. Economic collapse. What else? Chemical, the NBC, the nuclear, biological, chemical, terrorists, right? Airplanes falling out of the sky, power grid problems with the power grid. I mean, you want to see a group of people lose their minds. If the power goes out for any period of time, we're in deep kimchi. There'll be a lot of problems that way. Gasoline shortages, food shortages, any of those things, could really cause a problem. The economic problem that we're having right now is not a surprise to me. And I'll tell you for a couple reasons why. One is I've been reading about oil shortages and all these kind of things have been kind of talked about in some of the survivor, wacko, live in a hut in Idaho kind of groups. And there's a website that I go to. In fact, I'm going to give you a handout from this very website. This guy was talking about this back in December and January of this year, was talking about this kind of problems that were coming down the pike. But that's not exactly why I was not overly surprised. And the reason is, I've been waiting 7 years for these kind of things to happen right now. Why 7 years? Because in the October conference, just after the 9/11 attacks, President Hinckley said in conference, "I do not know what the future holds. I do not wish to sound negative, but I wish to remind you of the warnings of Scripture and the teachings of the prophets which we have had constantly before us. I cannot forget the great lesson of Pharaoh's dream of the fat and lean kine and the full and withered stalks of corn. I cannot dismiss from my mind the grim warnings that the Lord has set forth in the 24th chapter of Matthew. I am familiar, as are you, with the declarations of modern revelation that the time will come when the earth will be cleansed and there will be indescribable distress with weeping and wailing and mourning and lamentations. Now I do not wish to be an alarmist. I do not wish to be a prophet of doom. I am optimistic. I do not believe the time is here when an all-consuming calamity will overtake us. I earnestly pray that it may not. There is so much of the Lord's work yet to be done, and we and our children after us must do it. He said that in October of 2001. Now that struck me. I'm an emergency preparedness kind of guy, but when a prophet stands up and says something like that, my ears perked up. He said it again at another conference. This time, October 2005. Our people for 3/4 of a century have been counseled and encouraged to make such preparation as will assure survival should a calamity come. We can set aside some water, basic food, medicine, and clothing to keep us warm. We ought to have a little money laid aside in case of a rainy day. Now that what I have said should not occasion a run on the grocery store or anything of that kind. I am saying nothing that has not been said for a long time. Let us never lose sight of the dream of Pharaoh concerning the fat cattle and the lean and full ears of corn and the blasted ears, the meaning of which was interpreted by Joseph to indicate years of plenty and years of scarcity. He said it twice, basically the same talk about being prepared, and that was in a talk that was, if you are prepared, you shall not fear. And so I have my family, in fact, for the last 18 months or so, has really put ourselves in a high gear, because I kept telling my wife, I said, you know, 7 years is up this October. You know that? She goes, yes, I know. And we have other people who've had those kind of promptings and motivations that way. And so when this huge bailout that the government is planning and the storms that come, I'm kind of been not waiting for this to happen, but I've anticipated something amiss, because the prophet had said we're going to have 7 good years. Well, he didn't necessarily say we're going to have 7 good years and 7 bad years, but he said I can't dismiss this from my mind. And so I've been preparing as much as I possibly can for that inevitability. As the Utahns migrated out of Utah and came south, they established the city of San Bernardino. I never drive to Utah and not think about how I sit and travel at 60 miles an hour in air-conditioned comfort and go between here and there in about 10 hours. Well, that trip used to take them, 30 days. I don't know exactly how long it was, but I never make that pass without making an aside to my children about that. But I wanted to take a quick snapshot of how life has changed for us who live in the United States.